Despite the name of this prompt, this will not be an emotional video. I'm saying that to myself now. I am not going to cry in this video. It will not be an emotional video, and it will have no spoilers. Hello friends, happy Wednesday. So very excited that you're here. I can't believe this is the final prompt for August. Like, dude, what happened to the time? Don't worry, there'll be plenty of exciting prompts coming next month. But in case if you're not familiar what Top 5 Wednesday is, in a nutshell, basically each week I answer a prompt using 5 books, but in this case I do manga to reflect the said prompt. And today's prompt is Made You Cry. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be where you cried because it was necessarily sad. You could have cried because you felt very moved by what was happening, or maybe you felt relief that everybody was okay, or maybe it was because of a happy ending, a happy situation. Maybe you felt some relatability with the character and you just felt like, wow, like that's the first time in a long time I've seen myself in this character and seen myself seen in a book. As I shared before, there will be no kind of spoiler for any of these manga because one of them is a sad pick, but I'm not going to be saying any spoilers on that at all. I'll get to that eventually because I have a lot, well, I feel like I have a lot to say on that one, but let's go ahead and start off. For number 1, I am saying Orange Future. Now I have read and reviewed Orange. I do have a review on this channel. It's sort of interesting because I felt like I got emotional when I read the original series, or I say original with quotes, but it really wasn't until this volume that I cried buckets. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was definitely a lot of sadness and some happiness going on before this volume, but when we got to this volume, I just felt so incredibly wrecked because I loved Suwa in the original series. I very much related to him. I loved his character. And if you've read this volume, you know basically everything we knew about Suwa has been flipped on its head. He degraded himself so much in this volume, and it was very hard for me to stomach and to read because I'm just like, you were so happy and so upbeat and so positive and encouraging. But in this one, it's not like he didn't have them anymore, but he had no kind of self-confidence in himself. He was really struggling. I feel like maybe not necessarily with depression, but he could not cheer himself up and cheer up other people around him like he did before. And I was absolutely crushed by that. I felt a lot of relatability in what he was feeling, and that you're very much a sunshine kind of person, but you definitely have dark struggles that other people may not know about. And so I would say I did like seeing that, and I was thankful to see something, a similar struggle that I have represented, but it was heartbreaking. This is my favorite volume of the series, despite that it is the most tear-jerking for me. I know a lot of people really didn't like this volume, which makes me sad because I think it's just hard because Suwa's not the same character, but I still really, really love this volume. Out of any volume in the series that I have reread more than once, it is definitely this one. I bought it digitally, and then after I sobbed, I went and bought it physically, which is really rare because if a manga makes me sob like that, chances are I'm not going to go out and go get it physically because I'm like, I'm probably never going to reread that again. Like, I want something to make me happy. But this volume definitely made me cry. It is so good. I feel like if you're stopping at the volume, what would be volume 6, keep going. Keep going for Suwa, even though it is heartbreaking. For number 2, oh my goodness, this manga, this volume made me sob a bunch. Like, I think out of any of these volumes that I'm featuring today, that maybe I cried the hardest, it was this one, and that is volume 17 of Queen's Quality. No spoilers, but when I turn that page, like, you'll know, there's a page, you turn it, and oh my gosh, I literally started deep wrecking sobs, whole body shaking, felt so many emotions. I wish I could go more in depth. I'm thankful that every person I know who has read this volume had the same exact experience because the previous volumes up to volume 17 are very, very intense. High stakes. I mean, we're going high stakes and beyond high stakes, getting more and more intense. And finally, everything comes to this one moment where everything feels so incredibly hopeless, only for you to turn that page and you see that your hope, that these characters' hope, was never ever for a moment in vain. I loved it. I cried so hard. My kiddo just happened to come out when I was reading it, and he's like, "Mom, are you okay?" And I'm like, you know, try to blow up my nose and be like, I'm okay, but I wasn't okay, but I was okay. It is so moving. Anytime I have gone back and looked at those pages, those panels, it gets me crying every single time. It is a beautiful, amazing, incredible scene, and I just admire the manga creator of how she built everything up, where we have so many moments where we're doubting, are these characters going to be okay? And she takes that scene, she takes those moments, and she says, yes, don't lose hope. Don't think for a moment that evil or the darkness is going to win, because it is not. I cannot recommend this series enough. I did do a video review earlier this year, a few months ago, sometime over the summer. It was a very emotional experience reviewing this, and I definitely wish I did this series more justice, because it is so very, very moving, and I love all the characters. I'm like nervously excited to know where things are going to go in volume 18. I definitely need it because my heart was a hot mess when I read this volume. For number 3, so when I was picking out volumes for this video, I actually cried again when I was reading this, and that is Kimi Todike volume 30. Every single time Sawako goes and she reads that letter, I start crying. Like, it never ever fails. I mean, I start getting emotional before that, but it's that moment specifically that I just start crying. And I don't know how many times I've read this volume, and every single time I literally cry. Like, it's so deeply emotional and impactful, and there's so many feelings in that moment. Just everything that this letter has, it's everything. I can't say more because it would be massive spoilers for this volume, but hands down, I feel like this is one of the most emotional volumes in the series that gets me every single time. I love it so much, even though I cry every single time, and I don't think it's necessarily sad per se. There's just a lot of different feelings. Like, I just saw the one scene, I'm like, oh my goodness, like that too is a scene where I start feeling really emotional, and it's just the building up, never losing hope, and just believing in love. It's a very beautiful ending, but I cry every single time. For number 4, I sort of laugh about this one because I had everything planned out that I wanted to say, right? And then I was like, let me go try and find the scene that I want to talk about. I started reading the manga, and I was like, I sort of want to talk about something else, but I'm going to choose the manga or the volume that I wanted to feature, and that is Yona of the Dawn. I don't know how many times I cried when reading this series. I was trying to think of, like, could I feature one scene, one moment that really wrecked me? I feel like there's just too many to count. There's just too many to count. I was ultimately going to feature Gija because of any character in the series that I related the most to, it was definitely Gija. I love him so much, and I just find him such an incredible and inspiring character in the way that he serves Yona, the way that he dedicates himself to being the best servant that he can be, and growing his, I was just like growing his skills, but growing as a dragon and as a person, and how loyal he is to not just Yona, but to all of the dragons, and how faithful of a friend he is. I find him just a very inspiring and very emotionally moving character for me. I was gonna say his backstory because of how upbeat of a character that he is, and how often he's smiling and encouraging other people. I was so devastated when we hear his backstory. Now, I feel like somebody could easily say any of the dragons' backstory is really heartbreaking, because when I was reading this volume, this is when they go get Senha, and I was like, oh my goodness. I was about to start crying this morning because Senha is my ultimate favorite character in Yona, with Gija coming in a very quick second, and sometimes depending on the day, Gija is my best boy of the series, but I love Senha, and I feel like because it's been so long, I forgot how emotionally moving his backstory is. I feel like when we think of really emotional moving parts of the series, instantly we think of Zeno, and rightfully so, because I definitely cried multiple parts at Zeno as well. Like, he may seem like the friendliest and most upbeat character, but he has like the most tragic backstories out of like anybody. So there's a lot of parts in Yona, well, yeah, made me cry, so it's hard to pinpoint one exact moment. There's a lot of them, they're just scattered throughout the series, and I really need to reread it, because when I was trying to go back and find that scene with Gija's backstory, I'm like, I don't know where it's at. And of course, like, the Yona of the Dawn wiki did not help. Like, it tells me, but I'm like, where in the volume, where in this series do we get this scene? It is an emotional roller coaster. Very thankful that so many people encouraged me to read, and I definitely did a review of this series. Very moving story. So I'm sorry I don't have like one set scene where I'm like, this moment made me cry, when I'm like, there's just a whole bunch of moments that made me cry. For number 5, I'm having a similar problem where I was like, I'm going to talk about this one certain scene, and then I was going to go read a volume of with that said scene, and I read other volumes. I'm like, you know, I sort of want to change my mind a little bit because I'm like, that scene made me cry as well. And I am going to, of course, say Haikyuu. There are 2 different moments. So I'm definitely going to say with 41, I feel like this whole match with this team, I don't remember their name. They're the Seagulls, though. That's their mascot. This whole match was such a emotionally moving one, and I want to be very careful of what I say because I know quite a few friends that love Haikyuu, but they're anime only. When the movie does the whole thing on screen, just prepare for the tear works. Prepare, because there is a scene in this that I was reading this morning. It was hard to read. In fact, I sort of skim read. I'm like, I don't want to get emotional and start crying, but it was absolutely devastating. That's all I'll say. I don't want to say anymore, but that scene for sure, because I thought this was in volume 42 that this scene happens, but it was actually near the end of this one, and it's one of those moments where I'm like, I never want to see something like this again. And I'm also sort of going to feature, since it's part of the match, also want to say when it comes to our ace, I love our ace. His struggle in this volume was so very relatable when he's talking about how he depends on his teammates, he believes in his teammates, and he knows that they are incredible, amazing people, but the only person that he doesn't necessarily believe in and trust is himself. Then how he constantly degrades himself, like that he could have been better and that he's the worst person at this. And I easily find myself falling into that trap, that I'm like, I will say all of the best things about other people, I will encourage them, lift them up, but when it comes to myself, I am the first person in line to degrade myself, to not speak kindly to myself. And so this volume is always really, really emotional for me because he has a turning point and he's like, you know, I want to believe in myself today and I'm going to go out there and score 1 point. And every time I read that, I just get so emotional because I'm like, I 100% get your struggle, man. I really, really do. Some days are worse than others, but I really love just seeing that struggle and that overcoming represented in this volume. So it's definitely an emotional volume for me personally. I feel like this volume and then that scene in volume 41 are sort of on equal ground when it comes to how emotional they are. But I'm really excited to see these moments animated and I hope that they are done justice. I know I'm going to cry a whole bunch. So just be ready if you're anime only because it is going to bring the tear works. For my honorable mention, we are not going to really talk about it because it's actually one scene in the One Piece manga that I refuse to acknowledge that it ever happened because I read it one morning. It's the only part of One Piece that I've actually fully read. That is the Marineford arc. And we'll just say, if you know, you know. It's about my favorite character and we just don't talk about it. So yeah, that is it for my video and my picks. I hope that you enjoyed these. I hope it wasn't too sad or anything. It was definitely getting a little bit emotional for me thinking about these moments in these manga and how they have impacted me. But I would love to hear from you, friends. What are some manga that have emotionally moved you and made you cry? I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!